Hello there, it is me, the TheDuelLogs. Let's turn on some music. I'm a 300-pound psychic spider who lives on the moon, Earth's moon. Today, I'm going to be teaching you humans how to play a children's card game. It's very simple, and in today's episode, we'll be going over the damage step. Before we go over the damage step, does anybody have any questions? No? Okay. First up, we're going to go over, did you know there are exceptions in the damage step? Like Vivid Night, for example. Vivid Night says during either player's turn, except during the damage step. That's pretty important. It has an effect to save a Beast Warrior monster if it's going to be destroyed. And there's also Winged Rhino, which also has a thing where it says except during the damage step. And there's also Fire King Yaksha, who says if it's destroyed, except during the damage step. They can't activate their effects, and there's a big reason for this. You see, it's because Konami decided the damage step is the sacred step, which nothing can activate it unless it specifically says so. Basically, only cards which can be activated during the damage step are cards which increase or decrease the attack of monsters. This is the damage step. We're not going to need that. So let's set up an example. We have two cards, and one of them is we want to destroy it with Raigeki Break. That's fine, except outside of the damage step, because this card is it doesn't affect attack or defense. So if you attack into your opponent's monster and they activate Forbidden Lance during the damage step to decrease the attack of the monster by 800, you would not be able to use Raigeki Break to destroy your opponent's monster to prevent the battle, because Raigeki Break is not fast enough to be activated during the damage step, unless it is, because there are some exceptions to this, like Solemn Judgment, for example. Counter trap cards are spell speed 3 and the fastest cards in the game, and one of their privileges is being able to be usable at any point. And the only thing that can respond to counter trap cards are other counter trap cards, except for a few exceptions we can go over the future and other lessons for Incorrigible morons, you know, like you guys. If it's the damage step and your opponent activates a Forbidden Lance, you can simply chain Solemn Judgment in order to negate its effect. So attack boosters and counter trap cards can be activated during the damage step just fine, and are usable at almost any point. The effects of cards which increase or decrease the attack of defense can also be activated during the damage step, but only up to a certain point. So let's go over some exceptions, because those are always fun. There are things like Evil Sword Logia or Natura Beast. They are also usable during the damage step because they negate the activation of a card. Wait, are you stream while making this video? Shut up. So anyways, we have cards which can negate the activations of cards, which are usable during the damage step. But we also have cards which just negate normal stuff. So let's see, if we take a look at Archifiend Abyss over here, it has an effect to negate. However, its effect negates the effects of a card and not the activation, so it's not usable during the damage step. You knew you would say that, and there you are. It's not pre-recorded. But you can't negate the effects during the damage step? Yes, unless you can. Although it can't use its effects, so as long as you just wait till the damage step in order to use Forbidden Lance, you should be able to use it on Hot Red Dragon Archifiend, except for Nature of Beast, which is just going to negate the effect. There are some cards, which can negate effects that are usable during the damage step, mainly Forbidden Chalice, but that's because it has an effect to increase or decrease the attack of a monster tied to it. Unlike Hot Red Dragon Archifiend Abyss, which does not. That's why Forbidden Chalice kind of cheats a little bit, because it also has the effect to just negate the effects of a face-up monster until the end of the turn, but it's usable during the damage step. Forbidden always confuses me. Forbidden Droplet, Forbidden Chalice. These cards were basically designed to be usable during the damage step, just to kind of follow the rules. However, funny thing, there are cards which do modify the attack and defense of a card which are not usable during the damage step. There's a card called Curse of Anubis, for example. This one. So, make it bigger. It says change all effect monsters in the field to defense position until the end of the turn. Also, the original defense of those monsters becomes 0, and their battle positions cannot be changed. Technically, Curse of Anubis changes the attack and or defense of a monster to 0, which is, you know, an attack or defense increase or decrease. But it's not usable during the damage step because it changes monsters to defense position first and then applies the 0 defense afterwards. There's also cards like Reverse Trap, which simply set the values of attack and defense. This one has the effect where it reverses the attack gains and attack decreases of attack and defense monsters. And it's not usable during the damage step, even though it only affects, you know, attack or defense, because it doesn't increase or decrease attack or defense. It reverses their attack or defense. It's a special condition applied to attack and defense positions, which doesn't actually change the attack or defense in a way that is usable during the damage step. So you understand? My opponent's playing Final Countdown and keeps using Battle Fader to stop my attacks. Can I just jump on the table and attack him directly? Yes. That goes outside the rules of this. I don't get how Jaden was sleeping through his class. This is the most entertaining thing I've ever seen. Hello, Mr. Logs have goofed up with Thing the Chalice. Activate the damage step and you'll send you monster who can attack directly, thinking I can disable the effect and will behold 700 damage. Yeah, you see the thing with Forbidden Chalice, the effect to attack directly is already going through. You have to stop it before that phase happens, otherwise it can go through it. Whatchamacallit, that was a very common tactic back in Duel Links with Anki. Because Anki is a master hero monster which can attack directly. However, if it does, the damage it deals is halved. So they would actually save Forbidden Chalice to the very end of the damage step in order to negate that effect, but still have the direct attack go through for full damage. And there's other effects which can activate during the damage step. Flip and floating effects, for example. Let's put Morphine Jar and Sangian. These effects do trigger during the damage step, as well as effects which trigger on battle damage taken, like White Magical Hat, which is being blocked by me. But you guys know what that does. If it deals battle damage, you discard one card from your opponent's hand. So anyways, this is all pretty simple stuff, right? Now that we've gone over the simple stuff, let's go into the complicated part, breaking down the damage step into its different categories. First up, we have Attack Declaration. At this point of the Attack Declaration, you can activate any spell speed 2 effects like normal. Things like Raigeki Break can be used at the Attack Declaration because we're not in the damage step yet. And a lot of effects are triggered by Attack Declaration, like Mirror Force, for example. This is one that only activates at the Attack Declaration phase, but we're not in the damage step yet. So Mirror Force could be negated by something like Red Hot Dragon Archifiend because we're not in the damage step. We're not in the Sacred Super Fast phase. We're about to get to it though. So next up, we have the start of the damage step. There are a few cards which have effects that only activate the start of the damage step. You guys might note some of them. There's Neospatian Grand Mole, Eater of Millions. These effects have things that only activate at the start of the damage step, which means they can't be negated by normal negates. So there's no Infinite Impermanence at this start. No Hot Red Dragon Archifiends. However, Forbidden Chalice would still work because it activates in the damage step. That's what made Neospatian Grand Mole so strong, was because it was very hard to negate the effect, because it happened at the start of the damage step, which is technically inside the damage step. Cards which activate at the start of the damage step have historically been pretty powerful. You guys, anyone remember Ally of Justice Catastor? This was a card which destroyed anything it attacked into as long as it was a non-dark, but it was only at the start of the damage step, which is technically in the damage step. If you want to negate these effects, you have to do so at Attack Declaration, but before the damage step. Unless you have an effect which can negate the activation of the effect, you know, like Evil Sword Dalgia. And there's even a few cards which can only be activated during the damage step, which would be alive at this time now. Cards like Face Off, which is a terrible counter trap. Well, let's put this one on top. Does anyone know what Face Off does? This is a counter trap that negates anything but can only be activated during the damage step. And we're now in the damage step finally, so it could be activated here. Now, let's go over to damage calculation. So we have damage calculation. Oh, never mind. I was about to say, I totally skipped something. So we have started the damage step, and then we also have a phase called after the start of the damage step. I forgot because it's so dumb. So at this phase, you flip face down monsters face up. And a distinction to be made about these cards, which are flip face up at this time, is that they have any continuous effects are applied immediately unless they're not. So if you flip up a Jinzo, for example, because it was face down, it will start negating trap effects immediately. So if your opponent is equipped with something with an attack booster, like Rocket Hand or Metal Morph, their effects will still be immediately turned off at this time due to Jinzo's effect. But if the continuous effect would destroy the card, like Giant Kozaki, or any one of the Burning Abyss monsters, its continuous effect is not applied just yet. Also, any flip monsters are not activated yet either. That happens later. So you get that at the start of the damage step, you flip cards face up, and then immediately their continuous effects are applied, unless they're not. And you just have to kind of know the rulings on that. Next up, we have damage calculation. So the damage calculation is pretty simple. It's the phase of the damage step where you're trying to calculate which monsters have attacks that other monsters attacks and how much life point damage you take and whether a monster is destroyed or not. So there are sub-phases within the damage calculation. First up, we have sub-phase number 1 before damage calculation. This is the last opportunity you have in order to activate the effects of cards which increase or decrease attack. So if you want to use Forbidden Lance or Rising Energy, this is your last chance to use them. Or even hand traps, like Honest or Blackwing Colute the Moon Shadow. This is also where the effects that are activated when a card split face up immediately will applied, like Blast Spear, before damage calculation. So if it would immediately attach itself to a monster that attacked it. There's also certain cards which have effects that only activate before the damage fit, like Reflect Bounder or yugioh, which would be applied at this point as well as effects of cards which interact with face-up defense position monsters but don't trigger until the damage calculation, like Ihiran, the Lightsworn Monk, who has an effect where if it attacks a defense position monster, it shovels it into the deck. Since the card is technically flipped up before the damage calculation, some cards can be sneaky and get around the distinction and activate anyway, even if the card was face down at attack declaration. So, this card specifically only shovels a monster if it's in face-up defense position, but it counts because it is face-up at this step, because it activates at the start of damage calculation. So, that makes sense, right? At this point is the last chance you'd have to increase or decrease attacks and defense. So if you use something which would increase or decrease the attack and defense, you could use it here, but if you also activate the effect of a card which negates the activated effects of cards, you could use it here as well. But it's only the activations. Like, it has to say negates the activation of the effect and destroys it, and not just negates the effect of a card. There is a difference. Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring negates the effect of a card, whereas Ghost Spell and Haunted Mansion negates the activation. Only the ones that negate activation can be used here. I just realized something. I have to manually unclick all these. Now we go over to damage calculation. This is where you determine who wins the battle, how much life point damage is taken. This is also when some cards specifically activate their effect, like Injection Fairy Lily. Although a distinction about cards which only activate their effects at this point is that they can only apply their effects a single time. So because of this, there's no need for a lot of these cards to have a once per turn on their effect. So Injection Fairy Lily has an effect where you can pay 2,000 life points to increase her attack by 3,000 points. There's no once per turn on it at all, but there's just a rule in place where you can only use it once. So you can't just pay, 6,000 life points in order to gain, 9,000 attack because of this particular phase. It also used to be, there was a ruling back in the day where you could also use attack gains at this point as well. So what people would do is wait till this point for Injection Fairy Lily to use her effect, and then they would chain Honest at this point. But there was a ruling update where you can't do that anymore. So now Injection Fairy Lily, if you want to try to Honest it, you have to do it before this phase, and it probably won't work. Oh, I could probably just show you guys Honest, so you actually understand what I'm talking about. So anyways, that's the damage calculation. Then we have the after damage calculation, which is his own little phase, where whoever came out of losing of that battle will take damage, which will immediately trigger the effects of certain cards. So cards with self-destruct effects and survive the battle will immediately then destroy themselves, like Giant Kozaki. Then we have the effects that trigger after damage calculation. So cards like Exterior Airbellum, where if it declares a direct attack, you discard one card from your opponent's hand, or Watt Cobra, which searches a Watt monster. These activate at this point of the damage calculation. In addition to cards which activate after damage calculation, like a DD Warrior Lady, and also the effects of flip monsters finally happen here. Although a funny thing to note, monsters who have been destroyed by battle do not count as being on the field, but are not sent to the graveyard yet. So if you have a flip monster effect which requires the monster to have survived the battle, like Dummy Golem specifically, which has the effect to swap control of itself with one of your opponent's monsters, it won't actually trigger because Dummy Golem is considered destroyed and thus not a viable target to be swapped to your opponent, even though it will still be on the field at this point of the damage calculation. Why the BA no die? The BA would die at this point if you had another non-BA monster on your side of the field. Now we have the end of the damage step. Cards like Neos Wise Man or the legendary Jujutsu Master have effects which activate at this point. This is also when the effects of cards activate that trigger when something is destroyed by battle, since cards are finally sent to the graveyard at this point. So cards like the Flamevell Fire Dog, which has to destroy a monster by battle and send it to the graveyard, will be able to special summon from your deck now. Or Mystic Tomato, which has to be destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard. It will now be able to special summon a monster from your deck at this point. So those are the basics of the damage step. And you also have 5 different phases of the damage step. That was just damage calculation, which includes the start of the damage step, before damage calculation, after damage calculation, and then the end of the damage step, which is still technically the damage step. And at this point, at the end of the damage step, when we're finally done, that's when the effects of things like that happen after you take damage would happen, because they don't need to happen immediately. Let's go over an example to learn what we've learned about the damage step. So in this example, we have player 1 is attacking with Elemental Hero Brave Neos into Hot Red Dragon Archifiend Abyss, and has the field spell card Skyscraper out on their side of the field. As you guys all know, Skyscraper has the effect where if a hero monster attacks another monster that has more attack than it, it will gain 1,000 attack. So, in this example, if player 2 with the Red Hot Dragon Archifiend has an effect which can negate the effect of a card in the field, tries to activate it in response to Brave Neos attacking into it, it wouldn't work because they'd have to use it before damage calculation, or the damage step happens. However, if they do use it at attack declaration, then they can actually negate the effects of Skyscraper to stop Brave Neos from destroying it by battle. That's basically the basics of the damage step. Hopefully you've learned why the damage step is so simple. It's pretty easy to figure out. Next time you can join us as we explain other simple concepts in this children's card game for absolute incorrigible morons like you, which are easily available if you just read the rulebooks and memorize all the intricacies of every little thing. Why are we on Jupiter, Mr. Teacher? Shut up. There's no Jupiter. Did you guys know Twitch doesn't allow me to put moron in the title? So it says on Twitch, Yu-Gi-Oh! Rulings for absolute incorrigible humans like you.